We've talked a couple of times recently about getting ready for school. And with many families and people that support kids, there's a lot to think about with this and a lot of things that Dr. Kathy is talking about. But one of the things that we might not be thinking about is the pure fact that technology and the world of education and testing students' knowledge has dramatically changed in the last 10 months, thanks to different tools like Chat GPT and other artificial intelligence engines that are now being utilized by many students and adults alike. Preparing kids in this world can be a really dark place. But today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in our daily segment, Facing the Dark, we're going to kind of boil this topic down. What do we need to prepare our kids for with this technology that's coming? So let's turn to Dr. Kathy now for some insight.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
Dr. Kathy, there's a lot of schools that are looking as they start up again at some of the realities in the advancement of artificial intelligence. We kind of call it AI, right? And in this sphere of artificial intelligence, there's some new platforms that have developed, one specifically called Chat GPT. Many of us might know of what it is, but it's basically a platform or a program where you can type in a question or an idea, and it pulls in information from the internet that they've kind of built out, and they've actually kind of put a timeline on it. The internet up until, and I think it was April 2021, they kind of compiled all of this information, and then they've built these different systems to be able to pull that information out. So you could type in, how do I make an apple pie? And it'll just give you a list. Or you could type in something like, give me an essay that's 1,500 words on George Washington and his horse, and explain how George Washington felt about horses, and explain how George Washington would ride a horse, and explain 3 different examples of how George Washington and his horse were in history. And it will give you that. And actually at the bottom, oftentimes if you ask it to cite sources, it will send you the links or the books that it cites the sources from. It's dynamic. It's incredible. But it's a reality that is going to impact schools, right? Because students have had kind of this chance now over the summer to play with artificial intelligence, especially Chat GPT. And I know that there are some schools that are looking to kind of shift the projects that they have that kind of gauge student knowledge, because of the reality that most of these projects aren't going to gauge a student's knowledge, but instead almost gauge a student's ability to use technology. In our school district, this means that more students are going to be writing their papers by hand, and they're going to have more digital monitoring when they're at school. And I know that some, even in our school district, are going to have more verbal presentations. It's going to kind of force some schools, maybe in different parts of the country, to kind of look at shutting down technology altogether based on how they've been looking at gauging student development and student growth and student performance. So I think there's kind of a natural fear for some of us with technology, maybe kind of a fear of the unknown, or a fear that the things that we've kind of always graded students by when we kind of look at this from school is now kind of called into jeopardy because of these different artificial intelligence platforms that are going to be really at the fingertips of students. The whole landscape, I think, of education and training is shifting. What should parents kind of look to as grounding for this, especially as they look to this with schools? Should we be concerned with papers? Because we know that when students graduate, they're going to be able to kind of in their workplace. And I know this because I've got friends that do this, that type in, give me a marketing plan that outlines these 5 different things in 3 different ways in 2,000 words. And they do that in their workplace. So we know students are going to be so we know adults are using this. We know that students are going to do it later on too. Should schools kind of shift their training to more of virtues and ethics instead of maybe the 3 R's with reading, writing, and arithmetic? Because technology can now do that for us. What do you think?
Wow. I think it's a mess. Oh my gosh. I'm glad I'm no longer teaching in the classroom because these are big issues. I really appreciate the explanation that you provided. And then, this beginning question, I think it's both virtues and ethics forever and always, because even when you and I were in school and we were using the old fashioned lead pencil, we still had to understand, not to exaggerate, not to lie, not to steal an idea, to cite resources, appropriately, to honor the teacher's request that it be 500 words and not 700. So yeah, virtues and ethics. And then, but also reading, writing, and arithmetic. Absolutely, for sure. For instance, to tell Chat GPT what to do, you would have to know the difference between a persuasive essay and an informative essay. So you still have to understand the basics of writing. Why 2,000 words and not 2,500? When is it appropriate to have a bullet point essay and when is it not appropriate to use bullet points? When do you cite references and when is it okay to say, based on research I've done, and not cite them? So we still better be teaching basics or we're really going to be in a messy place. And I would also hope, and maybe this is my being very idealistic, but I would hope that a student or an adult like us who asked the chat feature to do something for us would still read it and evaluate it. We have kind of for fun, as you know, asked it to create a biographical sketch for me. And it's fascinating. It actually does a phenomenal job, except it leaves out faith. A little bit concerning to me because everything I do because of my faith in Jesus Christ. And yet, if we've done it, I think every time or the majority of the times that we've asked it, it'll have a pretty accurate summary of the history of my life professionally, but it will leave out that part. That's a serious omission because of my values and my mission and what I want people to know about me. So that takes my discernment. And that means I have to know myself and I have to know the purpose that I'm going to use the essay that AI created, et cetera. So there's still plenty to be taught. Even if we are going to use it now and in the future as they age up and become adults in the workplace.
I really like that, Dr. Kathy. I think that's really helpful for parents. I'd like to hear you kind of speak to this also for those of us that are going to be doing different teaching and training with students. You know, one of the things that I get a chance to do is teach a marketing and media class for my kids' school. And in the third quarter, we're actually going to learn how to build out Chat GPT programs. We're going to teach artificial intelligence to learn about our school and then train it how to kind of develop different meaningful content that we can then kind of use inside of different marketing platforms to kind of gauge interest and chart growth and different things that we can kind of use to kind of minister to audience as we go along and as we kind of learn how to do this. And I might be one of those people who kind of wants to use artificial intelligence. I think it might be kind of helpful for some of us. What would you say to me, maybe to caution me? Can we have this conversation publicly and just let everyone kind of let you kind of rip it apart a little bit? But because I think that many teachers and many parents are going to look at this technology and say, well, it's really important for students to learn it, but how can we kind of do that well? What would you say to kind of caution us or maybe to guide us as we look to use this in different classroom settings and with our kids?
Well, first of all, this is brilliant and I want to attend your class. This is what we need to do. We can't assume that adults or kids are just going to be able to use something new well. We've all had to learn how to use different platforms and devices and opportunities well. And if we haven't, then we've lost out because we didn't realize the power of something, or we gave up quickly and prematurely and believed one person who said it was evil, so we never touched it again. Can you imagine, Wayne, we've gone from the Walkman to the, pods in the ear. I mean, right to the iPod, to the, music on the phone, to, you went to the radio station, to the, cassette players in the car, to the CDs, to now, plug it in your phone and using Spotify and, whatever. I could go on. And so there's always been changes, and it's wrong to reject them all. It's wrong to be fearful about it all. We have legitimate concerns because of the ethics of, I don't want my intellectual property stolen. And I don't. I do what I do so people can use what I teach. I hope that people who listen to us here on Facing the Dark benefit and share the podcast with people and say in a teacher's lounge or in a small group at a church, hey, I heard Dr. Kathy talk about it and she made this really valid point. Like, I hope that you and I are influencing people's thinking, but I hope they'll say Dr. Kathy said, and they won't claim, that it was their original idea. And that's the concern that we have from an ethics standpoint. So yeah, let's teach it. And you're so smart to use it about your school. The kids will be interested in that. Don't teach AI with some irrelevant topic they don't care a hoot about. They're not going to listen. But teach them to use it well, and to train AI is fascinating. And to do it about their school, a place that they've come to appreciate, and they want more of the right kind of students there, I would think they would be really interested. I want to attend the class. I think it's a brilliant idea.
Well, maybe we'll make it video-based so then you can jump in and participate then.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But one of the things experts are encouraging schools as they kind of look at this with AI, and it's something that I've kind of been researching and trying to understand how I could best teach this class, is they talk a lot about empathy. And I think empathy in the digital space is something that's really important, but it's often not really considered. So I'd like to hear you kind of speak to this. What are some ways that we can kind of grow empathy in our kids? And how can we kind of link that growth and empathy then to this technological world that really oftentimes doesn't celebrate or even kind of give credence to empathy or kindness, right? We found this out with different social media platforms as it comes out about how they kind of create their algorithm for stories that kind of get boosted to the top of these different social media platforms, that anger and rage is kind of boosted to the top rather than kindness and empathy. So I think it's kind of natural for our kids to kind of gravitate towards, anger and rage and these different topics that would drive that rather than empathy. But I want to build empathy in the students and then link it also then to technology. How can I build empathy in these kids so that they can also then use it in their technological kind of worlds that they live in?
Very interesting. I never would have thought of this until you asked me the question. We're lacking empathy in general. So I would say let's step away from tech and just teach compassion and empathy in general. Are we other-centered? Are we selfish and only into ourselves? Do we notice people's pain and do we care about that? And do we want to put ourselves in their place so that we can understand how they feel and why they feel that? And that's going to then inform our response. Is our response quiet? Is our response solution? Is our response, tell me more of your story? So let's start with just people on people and just forget the tech for a second. But you're right then to say in technology, where's the kindness, other-centeredness, one anothering, and empathy? Absolutely true, because technology is so head-centered, right? We can just stay in that headspace of information, but it can be very hurtful because we don't have tone of voice. We don't have eye contact. We don't have give and take that's more spontaneous. We have to finish our AI or our text or whatever and then wait for response. And then we respond and it's very fake. It's very, regimented, if you will. So to engage the heart, how would your words make someone feel? Have you thought about that? And if they would make them feel a certain way, is that your intent? And why would that be your intent? In anger, as I write about in my Screens and Teens book, we think we can be our own authority because we have everything we need in our tech. So we don't have to listen to other people. So we get angry when other people tell us what to do. And it's just very, very sad. So to celebrate empathy, to celebrate compassion, to celebrate being other-centered and kind, I think is going to rock people's world. That will make someone hireable, and that'll make somebody promotable. That'll make somebody who's teachable, curious, and ready to sit in the front row and take life seriously. I love that idea.
I'm really grateful for the wisdom that Dr. Kathy gives to us. And kind of is something that happens here, I feel like a lot, where we just kind of glean different thoughts or ideas or different approaches to how we can encourage our kids and our families. And there's something about what she talked about here, about how we kind of are training our kids, that I think is really a moniker. It's a way that people will recognize and maybe even identify a follower of Jesus based on empathy. It's something that I think Jesus was talking about when he talked to the disciples in John chapter 13, beginning at verse 32. And this is what Jesus says to his disciples. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. I love the way that Jesus kind of encourages the disciples with this. He's going to leave them, but he wants them to remember some of the fundamental teaching that he's taught them. And he boils it down by preparing them for the things that they're going to face in the world. And he knows what that means. He knows that means martyrs' death for most of them. And the thing that he tells them and kind of equips them with is simply to love one another. And in doing that, people will know that they are following Jesus. I think those are encouraging words for us as we kind of engage and prepare ourselves for really a whole new frontier in education. And I think teaching our kids empathy and love, well, that's going to be a bright light that's going to shine and cut through the darkness and the fog of this cultural moment. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in our daily segment, Facing the Dark. We'd love to talk about the things that you're wrestling with. And maybe there's something you're kind of struggling with and need someone to kind of unpack a little bit. I'd love to ask Dr. Kathy some questions that you might have. And so you can just email me at wayne@ignitethefamily.com. That's WAYNE@ignitethefamily.com. And on behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, I want to thank you for listening, and we're looking forward to spending this week with you.